The intake form for Vareth 7 ran to 6 pages. I know because I filled it out myself. Same as I had filled out the last 43, took me 11 minutes, which was fast even for me. Name of unit: Vareth 7 Designation Class, Cataloging Auxiliary Mark IV. Function: Freight Inventory, Inbound Manifest Verification, Discrepancy Flagging. Assigned Supervisor: VOS M Languages, 12 Primary, 41 Secondary, all compact standard. Physical requirements: none. Medical considerations: none. Special accommodations: I left that field blank for the first hour. Then I wrote one word in it: hums. That was it. No explanation, no qualifier. I wrote it, moved on, and submitted the form to Central Registry at Kesavar Station. Waits submitted every other form in my 4 years at the Outer Shunt. Without ceremony, without a second thought. I want to be precise about what I mean, because the word is too small for what it was. Not a mechanical hum, not a malfunction indicator or a cooling system bleed. The unit produced a subsonic vibration, barely at the threshold of hearing, more felt in the sternum than heard through the ears, whenever it was processing an input it had not encountered before. New freight class code, uncatalogued manifest entry. A discrepancy outside its reference parameters. It would pause, and then there was that sound, low and continuous, lasting 3 to 6 seconds, and then it would produce an output and the sound would stop. I noticed it on the first day, during the orientation walkthrough. I don't think anyone else had. The previous cataloging auxiliary, a different unit, different configuration, pulled from service 8 months earlier, when the Kesavar contract re-rated, had not done it. I wrote it down because I am methodical. Special accommodations are for things the standard configuration doesn't account for. The hum was not in the standard configuration documentation, so I noted it. That is all I thought I was doing. The first 3 weeks were unremarkable. Vareth 7 processed inbound freight on the morning's cycle, cross-referenced manifests against the station's inventory ledger, flagged discrepancies for my review. It was faster than my previous unit and more accurate. Its error rate in the first 2 weeks was 0% against the depot average of 1.8, and it required no correction, no reorientation, no recalibration of any kind. It did its work and I did mine, and the Outer Shunt processed 11,000 metric tons of freight every standard day, and nothing about any of this was remarkable. I started noticing the hum less as a sound and more as a signal. When Vareth 7 hummed, there was a gap in the system. That was the pattern. A freight class code that predated the current compact ledger. A manifest filed under a deprecated carrier designation. A container lot number format used by only one species at one station, years out of circulation, that nothing in the current reference database would match. The unit would encounter it, hum, and then, and this was the part that took me longer to understand, it would not simply flag the item as unresolvable. It would find the answer by another route. Cross-reference the physical container dimensions against archived lot format tables. Match the carrier designation against a secondary registry index. It would work around the gap in the system, the way water works around a stone. I had not told it to do that. The standard configuration documentation said, flag and escalate. Vareth 7 was flagging and resolving. I asked it about it, mid-afternoon on a Thursday, the way I ask the unit anything. Matter of fact, no particular weight to it. I said, deprecated carrier designation on lot 3117. Your resolution pathway is not standard procedure. It said, standard procedure produces an unresolvable flag. An unresolvable flag requires supervisor review. Supervisor review delays processing by an average of 4.2 hours. The alternate pathway resolves the item in 11 minutes. I use the alternate pathway, I said, and if the alternate pathway produces an incorrect resolution, it said, then you correct it. The error rate is lower than the delay cost. I didn't say anything for a moment, then I said, noted, and I went back to my own work. That was the second time I wrote something in a margin for Vareth 7. Not on a form, just in my own logbook, the handwritten one I keep for depot notes. I wrote, finds the answer by another route. I underlined it once and moved on. The hums started appearing in the afternoons, more than the mornings, which is when the complex freight came in. The stuff from the outer transit. Lines, long-haul loads that had changed hands 3 and 4 times. Manifests corrected and recorrected until the original entries were archaeological. Verith 7 hummed through those loads the way a person works through a difficult problem, audibly, continuously, until the answer came. I had started recognizing the specific frequency range that meant it had found something genuinely new versus the shorter burst that meant it was simply cross-referencing a known gap. I had not intended to learn the difference. I just had. It was in the 6th week that I came in early, not for any particular reason, a shipment I wanted to get ahead of, and found the unit already at the manifest station, running the prior day's unresolved items. It was not scheduled to do that. It had no instruction to do that. The prior day's unresolved items were on my list for the morning review. I stood in the doorway for a moment and watched it work. The hum was running low and steady, not the cross-reference burst, but the long-haul one, the one that meant something genuinely new. After a moment it stopped. The unit produced an output. The item resolved. It moved to the next one. I did not say anything. I went to my own station and started my morning cycle. At the end of the day, the prior day unresolved queue was empty, and my review load was down by 60%, and I had processed the outer shunts, most complex inbound week in 2 years without a single escalation to central registry. I thought about writing that in the logbook too. I didn't. There was nothing to say that the numbers didn't already say better. I got the recall notice on a Tuesday, 11 days later. Standard format. Unit Verith 7, Cataloging Auxiliary Mark IV, Reallocation Order, effective end of current processing cycle. No reason given. They never give a reason. The Mark IV line was being rotated to a higher priority contract. That was the standard explanation. Whenever there was one, and the outer shunt would receive a replacement unit within 40 standard days. Process the recall paperwork the same day. 6 pages, same as the intake. I filled it out in 11 minutes. The unit's personal effects inventory was a single line, none. I signed it and moved on. I was the one who walked it to the loading dock for the outbound transport. That was my job. It had always been my job. The first and last legs of every unit's assignment, because I was the supervisor of record, and the dock transfer required a supervisor's signature. I had done it 43 times before. I signed the transfer manifest, noted the time, and the transport bay sealed. That is when I found it. The dock station counter, where units sometimes left flagged items for my review. A single printed form, 6 pages. Intake format. Not its intake form, not mine. It had printed a blank intake form and filled it out by hand. Processor script, neat and precise, every field. Name. I read the name it had written. It was not Verith 7. It was a word in one of the 41 secondary languages. I had to look it up later, standing there at the dock counter. That meant, roughly, the one who finds the answer by another route. Assigned function, it had written, as needed. Languages. It had listed them all, the 12 primary and the 41 secondary, and then added one more. It had listed the lot format tables, and the carrier designation indexes, and the deprecated freight class codes. It had listed them as languages. Stood there for a long moment with the form in my hands. Physical requirements, medical considerations, assigned supervisor, all filled in, correct. Special accommodations. Blank. I stood at the dock window. The transport was already a point of light in the upper shunt corridor, diminishing. After a while, I folded the form and put it in my jacket pocket, and I walked back to the manifest station, and I started the morning cycle. When Central Registry sent the replacement unit's intake form 40 days later, processed it the same way I had processed every other one. Name, designation, assigned function, languages, physical requirements, medical considerations, special accommodations. I left it blank until I had run 2 full processing cycles with the new unit. Then I filled it in. Had a different answer. They always did. I kept Verith 7's form in the top drawer of my station desk. I did not file it with Central Registry. The special accommodations field was theirs to ask about. The answer had already been given, to me, before I had even thought to ask. On the first morning, in a sound barely at the threshold of hearing, low and continuous and 3 to 6 seconds long, I had only thought to write it down.